Our chief guest, President of Pakistan, Dr. Arif Alvi, will be here in few minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, President of Pakistan, Dr. Arif Alvi. Please rise for. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the national anthem. We are about to formally begin the final session with the recitation from Holy Quran. I will invite Mr. Farooq Afzal to do the honor.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. The translation. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, He is Allah besides whom there is none to be worshipped, the who knower of everything hidden and open. He is the most affectionate, the merciful. He is Allah besides whom none is to be worshipped, the sovereign, the most holy, the bestower of peace, the giver of security, the protector, the esteemed one, the exalted, the majestic. Glory is to Allah from what they associate. He is Allah, the maker, the creator, the bestower of form to everyone. His are all good names. All that is in the heavens and the earth glorifies Him. And He is the esteemed one, the wise. Sadaqallahul Azim.
Jazakallah. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite Mr. Abdullah Dadaboy, Chairman CPSD and Dadaboy Foundation for the welcome address. Mr. Abdullah Dadaboy is a renowned fourth-generation businessman of international status and an entrepreneur by choice. He has a vision to serve humanity through 21st century education and policy research. A firm believer in peace and security as being prerequisite for development, Mr. Abdullah Dadaboy is the founder and chairman of Center for Peace, Security and Development Studies. Yet another innovative initiative of the Dadaboy Group is establishing Pakistan's first news and current affairs web TV, the dbtv. Mr. Abdullah's passion for providing quality education led to setting up of Dadaboy Institute of Higher Education in 2003. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Abdullah Dadaboy.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. His Excellency, President Islamic Republic of Pakistan, Dr. Avari Sahab, Honorable Shehryar Afridi Khan Sahab, Minister of State for Narcotics and Saffron, Honorable George Galloway, Mr. Muhammad Ali, the distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good afternoon to all of you. It is a matter of great honor for the Center for Peace, Security and Development Studies and an immense pride for myself to welcome His Excellency the President of Pakistan, Dr. Arif Alvi, for sparing time in gracing this extraordinary CPSD event at a very opportune time. I would particularly like to appreciate the international dignitaries for traveling to Pakistan from United Kingdom, as well as our friends who have arrived from different places of the country to be part of this very important peace initiative by CPSD that aims to internationally highlight the grave human rights situation in the Indian-occupied Kashmir. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, CPSD is a part of Dadabhai Foundation, and DIT, an institute which is chartered by the government of Sindh and recognized by HEC, is a degree awarding institute which is providing education to the poor and the needy at a very affordable price, and where major number of students are getting scholarships and financial assistance. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, Dadabhai Foundation, Dadabhai Institute of Higher Education, and CPSD are the philanthropic arm of Dadabhai Group, who are serving the cause of humanity and the nation. Ladies and gentlemen, CPSD deeply committed to promoting global and regional peace and has undertaken several important policy initiatives over the years in collaboration with our international partners in respect for more than a decade. I believe this is a very critical moment in the history of this important region, which will also have a major impact on the future of more than 1.5 billion people who live in this part of the world, as well as the rest of the world community that deals with South Asia through trade, security, educational and cultural exchanges. Ladies and gentlemen, Indian-occupied Kashmir is facing the biggest tragedy in the modern history. Since August 5, the human rights situation in occupied Kashmir has deteriorated to unprecedented level and scale. This has radically transformed the geopolitical landscape and geostrategic environment not only in Kashmir but also the entire region, due to several dangerous and provocative Indian steps which deserve deep, dispassionate and timely reflection to preserve regional stability and global peace. The recent unprovoked Indian actions tantamount not only usurping the identity and human rights of more than 8 million Kashmiris, but also threatening their fundamental rights to live, to movement, to access to medical care, work, education, and several other things. These draconian Indian actions are so called that even Indian opposition leaders, media, conscious scholars, and human rights activists have rejected and condemned them. As a natural and expected reaction, the Kashmiris have reacted with great anger and widespread and large protest, despite the region being under strict curfew by Indian forces for past more than 14 weeks. The entire region is under total media blackout, and the UN military observers, international organizations, human rights organizations, NGO, journalists, and even the Indian own opposition leaders are not allowed inside the Indian-occupied Kashmir. However, these Indian inhuman actions have not weakened the firm Kashmiri quest for freedom from Indian occupation and actually led to more intense hatred towards India and a stronger resolve to win their freedom from Indian occupation. Ladies and gentlemen, thankfully the world has not sat as idly as before, and international leaders, global organizations, media and international community have repeatedly shown deep concern at the grave and rapidly deteriorating situation in Jammu and Kashmir. UN Security Council, UN Secretary General, US Congress, British parliamentarians, EU Parliament, several Western political leaders have expressed deep concern at the human rights situation in Jammu and Kashmir. China and Turkey and Iranian leadership have also been critical of the Indian actions. However, this is not enough. All the Indians' actions inside Kashmir represent a grave and continuous violation of the human rights of the Kashmiri people and deserve immediate understanding, support, and intervention by the international community. The active and vibrant participation of our friends from United Kingdom today at this important CPSD international seminar is an evidence that our British friends are firmly committed to help Kashmiris win their freedom and restore their human rights from the Indian occupation. CPSD recognizes their support for the Kashmir cause and looks forward to more substantive and sustainable support from them in future as well. CPSD plans to take this vital international discourse on Kashmir and human rights globally, inshallah. Kashmir issue is not only about averting a humanitarian tragedy, but also deserves a timely and substantive international intervention to avoid conflict between two nuclear armed neighbors. Therefore, it is in the interest of the world community, which has deep and long-term political, economic and security interests associated with South Asia, to help restrain India and contribute towards de-escalation of the current crisis. More than 1 million strong armed forces of both the countries are on high alert and facing each other across the LOC in Kashmir. Pakistan's political and military leaderships have warned against the possibility of an Indian false flag operation to divert the world attention away from the humanitarian tragedy in the Indian-occupied Kashmir. The rapidly deteriorating human rights situation in the Indian-occupied Kashmir simultaneously offers a challenge, a responsibility, and an opportunity for this dangerous strategic environment and fulfill its moral, legal, and diplomatic responsibility to resist India from tyranny towards Kashmiris, reduce its military presence there, and pressurize New Delhi to fulfill its promise of plebiscite in Kashmir. Ladies and gentlemen, today's international conference offers a timely and important opportunity to mutually reflect and deliberate on the critical human rights aspects of the deepening Kashmir crisis and identify some policy options for the world and the Pakistan. Some of these policy options will be shortly presented by CPSD's Executive Director, Syed Muhammad Ali, in this session. We sincerely hope that this modest intellectual effort led to deeper international engagement toward the Kashmir issue and more profound and reflection by our national leadership. By participating in this important event, despite their pressing political commitments in the wake of the upcoming elections in the United Kingdom, the British political leaderships, human rights activists and lawyers have demonstrated their resolute support for the cause of humanity and genuine understanding and concern towards the plight of 8 million Kashmiri people who are hostage inside the world's largest concentration camp. The Pakistan nation and the Kashmiri people recognize and appreciate this noble gesture. Ladies and gentlemen, the present crisis not only presents a serious threat to the lives and future of over 8 million Kashmiris, it also is a dangerous challenge to Pakistan's strategic, security, economic and diplomatic interests, as well as the regional and world peace, security and development. CPSD, through this timely international initiative, aims to make a substantive and well-considered contribution towards international peace and regional security. We hope that this will also encourage greater synergy between key national and international stakeholders on policy issues of international concern. I would like to thank you, Mr. President, all those who are present here, and particularly our speakers again for joining us and helping CPSD organize this international event and making a substantive intellectual contribution towards the Kashmir cause. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for highlighting the importance of the collaborative efforts which the national and the international community has to do together. National organizations like CPSD is playing its role by conducting such seminars and doing research. And the evidence from the international community we have in the form of all the speakers which we have here today. Thank you very much, sir. Now, I would like to invite Mr. George Galloway for sharing his thoughts on this subject. Mr. George Galloway is a famous British politician, broadcaster, and writer. Mr. Galloway has been vocal about the human rights situation in Kashmir. He is famous around the world for his bold stance on human rights and Kashmir issue. He was also the General Secretary of War on Want, a British charity campaigning against poverty worldwide. Mr. Galloway is the author of many books. Few of them are Mr. Galloway Goes to Washington, Religion and Modern Thought, and the most recent one, The Principles of Religious Development. He opposed the Gulf War and was critical of the effect that the subsequent sections had on the people of Iraq. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. George Galloway.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Your Excellency, President of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, Minister of State, Afridi Saab, parliamentarians from England and Pakistan, Lord McRae, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In 1989, I was awarded the Hilal-e-Qaedi-Azam for my work in the 1980s in the movement for the restoration of democracy in Pakistan under the leadership of the late Nawabzada Nasrullah Khan, whom I fondly recall. In the early 1990s, I was awarded the Hilal-e Pakistan for my work on Kashmir. By the grace of God, democracy seems to have caught on finally in Pakistan, and parliaments are succeeding each other normally and lawfully, prime ministers being elected and re-elected. But Kashmir remains in bondage. Bondage now for the last 105 days or so. More wicked, more evil than ever before in the history of these 70 plus years. The clue to why we're here is in the title of the seminar, Human Rights in Occupied Kashmir. Just as you cannot support West Bromwich Albion and Wolverhampton Wanderers, or Celtic and Rangers, just as you cannot be a little bit pregnant, you cannot have human rights in an occupied territory. This is a contradiction in terms. The photographs behind me of cruelty and wickedness being visited by the occupiers on the occupied is not because the perpetrators are Indian, still less because they are Hindus. They are behaving in this way because they are occupiers. And all occupation ends this way. I'm old enough to remember when Israeli propagandists used to say that the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza was the most benign occupation in human history. And look what it has become. It has become exactly what we are seeing unfolding in Kashmir today. Because an occupied people will always resist. They may resist peacefully. They may resist violently. Although, as President Kennedy said, those who make peaceful change impossible make violent change inevitable. Something that the Indian authorities should now contemplate again. But an occupied people will always resist a foreign occupation of their land and their way of life. And therefore, human rights have to, ineluctably must, be shredded bit by bit as it becomes obvious that there is no acceptance of occupation by the occupied people. And so I say down this camera now, in the hope that they will hear me, I salute the struggling people of Kashmir, defending their hearth and home, defending their fields and their crops, defending their way of life, defending their mothers, their wives, their sisters, their daughters, defending their dignity and honor. I salute the families of the martyrs. I salute those held in their scores of thousands in the dungeons of that occupation, some of whom have been freed today by militant action by the freedom fighters in Kashmir. Glory be to God. I salute all of the people of the occupied land in their resistance. And as long as one of them is still resisting, I am certain that all of the people of Pakistan and all of the freedom lovers of the world will stand by them, will struggle to come to their side, to their aid. the picture is, of course, not bright. The suffering, especially in these last 100+ days, has intensified. We heard from Ambassador Sheikh earlier that the apples may not even be harvested, that the saffron cannot be sold. People are hungry. People are without medicine, cannot travel. They have been switched off, blacked out, cut off from the rest of the world. Even their own families do not know whether their relatives are alive or dead. But as long as the people in the occupied land do not give up, to use a phrase from my parliamentary colleague earlier, an occupied people that does not give up, does not agree to go in to the museum of ex-peoples, does not agree to live under the boot of their occupier, then it doesn't matter whether India sends 1 million, 2 million, 10 million occupation soldiers. They will still not succeed in breaking the will of the people that they subjugate. There have been important changes in this last 100 days. Things are being written in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, in the German media, even in the English media, which lags behind on this as on so many other things, that would never have been written before. Why is that? Well, I don't intrude on internal Pakistani politics in any way. It's up to you what you think of your Prime Minister. But I think he played a blinder at the United Nations. I think he knocked India for 6 over the boundary and out of the ground, a captain's innings. And I'm here to tell you, though I'm not his party man, that Pakistan finally has a political leader more popular internationally than the political leadership in India. I've lived a long life, and that has never happened before. Both because of the star quality of your leader, but also because the world detects the whiff, the smell of extremism about Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The world detects a whiff of the ethnic cleanser. The world can smell this ambition of ethno-supremacist exclusiveness about Narendra Modi, and they are anxious and worried about it. Because we have had some experience in the lifetime of people still alive today of where ethno-supremacists can take their own country and indeed the wider world, the whole world, as it happened. And this is why I say, I quote him again to Ambassador Sheikh, it is a false dichotomy to say that we're concerned about the situation in Kashmir and consider it to be unsustainable, but to merrily sign the trade deals and search the market in India. This is a false dichotomy, because I believe that if not checked, Modi will lead India to disaster. He will break his country. He will see it unravel. He will see erupting all kinds of secessionist and other struggles. He will not be able to impose this Hindutva mania that he imagines, not just in Kashmir, but with the Sikh people and other minorities, Christian people, other minorities in India. And at which point, the Indian market won't look so attractive. Investment in India will not look like such a good investment. So I caution the great people of India, do not allow this man to continue his madcap adventure with your future and the future of the region. I have little time left to speak, so I say this. This is not an internal matter for India. If it were internal, the Article 370 would never have existed in the first place. If it were an internal matter, there would have been no prohibition on the settlement of Kashmir by all and sundry. Neither is it a bilateral matter. First of all, if it's a bilateral matter, then the voices of the people of occupied Kashmir themselves cannot be heard and taken into account. It's a multilateral matter because two of the potential belligerents are armed with nuclear weapons, which could end life. In this part of the world where a quarter of the world's population lives and could escalate into a conflagration which would burn all of us. And therefore, the world has a duty to come onto the field of play here. And we must mobilize public opinion. We have to up our game, Mr. President. We do a lot. We hold protests and meetings and hand out leaflets without number. But our work is not good enough in terms of quality. And I hope that this wonderful CPSD can address this question, the quality of propaganda. Otherwise, we're merely preaching to the faithful. We're merely preaching to the choir. We have to reach those people who still think Kashmir is a scarf, a shawl, or an overcoat. We have to reach these people who don't actually care very much if poor brown Muslim children in the valley of Kashmir perish. It will not put them off their boiled eggs in the morning. We have to reach them and persuade them that it does matter to them, if not as human beings, then as people who may be endangered by this situation spiraling out of control. I look forward to the address of His Excellency, the respected President of Pakistan. I'm grateful for your attention. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Mr. Galloway, the enthusiasm with which you have talked today shows that how important this matter is to you, and where you have said that occupied people will always resist, whether peacefully or in violent manner. I sincerely hope that the world understand this as well and see Kashmir issue as human rights issue above economic benefits. Thank you very much, sir. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Syed Muhammad Ali for presenting the seminar report. Mr. Syed Muhammad Ali is the Executive Director of CPSD. He has 24 years long, rich and diverse experience of multilateral and bilateral negotiations and dialogues at the world's leading policy forums on strategic affairs, managing international media, consultancy to multinational companies, academic teaching, and policy research. His contributions on foreign security, energy, and nuclear policies have been published and quoted in the world's leading think tanks, such as Brookings Institute, CSIS, and RUSI. He has also served at the PTV World in the News and Current Affairs Department, where he conceived, planned, wrote, presented, and produced several television programs. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Syed Muhammad Ali.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Honorable President, Chairman CPSD, George, Shariar Saab, I think it is a great honor for me to be part of this modest but timely effort in an attempt to assure the Pakistanis and also the Kashmiris that they are not alone in their struggle, which is internationally recognized according to international law and UN resolutions. And in this case, I really appreciate the firm commitment which was aptly demonstrated by the presence of our friends from Britain, despite their pressing engagements in the wake of the upcoming elections. I think this is a good evidence that Pakistan's foreign policy and diplomacy is succeeding, and we are not alone in raising the Kashmir issue at all the international forums as much as we can, but obviously there's a lot of room for improvement. And in the past few hours, there was a rich, comprehensive deliberation on various aspects of how the human rights situation in Indian occupied Kashmir can be better understood, deliberated, practical options identified, and perhaps shared for timely consideration by those who are charged with the responsibility of conducting policy in Pakistan. Briefly put, for those who were not here, in the next 5 minutes, I'll try to give a brief overview of some of the more specific recommendations which have emerged in the past 2 sessions related to Kashmir. But before I get into the specifics, I must say that it will not be inappropriate to mention that the last few hours can be aptly encapsulated in 3 words: hope, confidence, and determination. The voices that we have heard have risen hopes for the Kashmiris. It has demonstrated the firm commitment of the Pakistani nation and also the determination of the international community that Kashmir is not an internal issue, it is not a regional issue, it is a global issue. And if you allow me to say, on a personal account, the Indian occupied Kashmir is the first and critical battleground for the decisive battle of the changing world order. It is a test for the existing status quo powers and also the emerging powers, that what side they are on. Are they going to continue the exploitative and materialistic preferential policies, or will they learn from the costly and destructive lessons of the 20th century statecraft and help save the humanity and enable and encourage the developing world that there is hope in a superior value of life, in a superior political system, in a better, prosperous region that this part of the world aptly deserves and is long overdue. Mr. Ahsan Mukhtar Zubairi Saab opened the House with his inaugural address, and he described this region thanks to the Indian occupied Kashmir's deteriorating conditions, as the most dangerous part of the world. And the history, geography, demography, and technology aptly has made this region the most dangerous part of the world, which cannot be neglected merely for moral or legal reasons, but it will have costly implications for the rest of the world. Those who see India as a land of opportunity are badly mistaken and neglectful of the searing courage and determination of the Kashmiri people, that if they rise up and resort to use of force in order to win the freedom that the Indian leadership promised them, then it will make India perhaps the next Afghanistan. They are capable of doing that, and the world must be warned that it is not a moral responsibility only, it is not a legal obligation only, it is not a diplomatic gesture only, but it is in their own international security and economic interest to restrain India from its belligerence, force it to resume dialogue and exercise restraint, and give the Kashmiris the rights that they deserve. And as my dear friend Mr. Shiraz from UK aptly pointed out, the ultimate test for Indian democracy is not that how many people vote and who is elected, but do they actually provide the rights to the Kashmiris that they themselves have promised. So that is something which emerged in the first part of today's proceedings. Very important thing that Lord Duncan pointed out, and I think it's a very apt reminder for the Pakistanis and particularly the Muslims and the Kashmiris, that actually in order to learn the lesson of human rights, the Muslims and Kashmiris need to look no further than the lesson that our last Holy Prophet provided us 14 centuries ago. And we are practicing that, and Lord Duncan aptly reminded us, we are practicing it, but we are not understanding it. Because if we understood the lesson properly, we would be proud, we would not lose hope, we will be determined, and the world will not just pay attention, but pay us respect as well. So I thank you for reminding us of our own forgotten lessons. This was followed by David Ward. He also emphasized and also highlighted the fact that he also has suffered because of the moral and strong stance that he took in support of Kashmiris. And it was costly. And that's exactly what he recommends in terms of policy prescription, that the cost of continuing Indian behavior towards the Kashmiris needs to be raised. All sorts of costs. And I think that's a profound suggestion. He also highlighted the fact that the phenomena of fake news provides challenges that scholars and responsible journalists and think tanks need to seize in order to expose the faults and the hollowness of the Indian narrative and the myth which is constructed on the edifice of democracy, which aptly and successfully, unfortunately, has hidden the problems, the tyranny, the hopelessness, the poverty, the exploitation that is rampant in the Indian society, but somewhat more evident in Indian occupied Kashmir. Mr. Ward was followed by Barrister Rashid Ahmed, a member of the Amnesty International, and I appreciate him taking time. He's a leading barrister on human rights and a vocal voice in London. He reminded Pakistan that the UN Human Rights Council recommendations need to be aptly reviewed and identified, not just in terms of narrative, but devising a strategy in order to implement those recommendations. And I'll just list three which he pointed out. It is important that the states should fully abide by international law and investigate all cases of abuse, investigate and prosecute all cases of violence. And these are some of the recommendations of the UN Human Rights Council, which we must deliberate in order to expedite them, not just articulate, and developing a policy mechanism at international and national level, how to implement it and how to lobby internationally and rally international diplomatic support to force India to do it, or if they don't, then to make this neglect of international law and obligations more costly for them. This was followed by another recommendation that he made, which is very interesting but relevant, that Kashmir is not just a human rights issue, but whoever violates human rights at the state level is responsible for use of violence and terrorism. So Modi Saab should be seen as a terrorist. So it's not just a deprivation and denial of human rights, but it also should be seen as a terrorist state, which is holding more than 8 million people hostage to tyranny. And he also aptly dismissed the false myth promoted in some segments of Indian media and political leadership that there is false hope for jobs, investment in Indian-held Kashmir. Mr. Marcus Tomlinson, who's a very articulate, internationally known speaker, he said something brief but very profound, that perception, knowledge, and media provides great challenges, but also fleeting opportunities that must be seized. And the stories which are shared around the world are not grounded in reality only, but also selective application and identification of facts. And that provides opportunities and responsibilities to our scholars, academics, as well as our journalists that were, and I think it was completely in sync with what Mr. Shahryar aptly pointed out, that Pakistan is perhaps the most misunderstood nation in the world. It is the most resilient. It has recovered from some of the greatest tragedies. It actually came into existence after perhaps one of the greatest human tragedies, that 1947 migration and the killings of the Muslims saw. We saw the 2005 earthquake and how the country rallied across all ethnic, religious, sectarian lines in order to save humanity. How we opened our doors and borders for our Afghan brethren. These are the stories that the world should know. But I think it is apt as a think tank to prudently recommend that it's not just a normative thing, but the onus is on the country, on think tanks, on media, on opinion makers, on thought leaders, that they must devise a plan, a strategy. They should be provided the means, the tools, the skill set which requires to rise to the challenge and conduct statecraft according to the 21st century environment. With these few words, I thank you for your patience and hearing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for the comprehensive seminar report. 3 words from his speech has really, struck me. It's like hope, confidence, and determination. And how he has brought it together with the Kashmir issue, I am sure all of you will agree to that, where he has said that the hope of the Kashmiri people, it was resonated here today, that this is what they want to achieve, and we are part with them. And along with it, not only that, but such efforts and activities which are no matter how small, but they actually give the Kashmiris the determination and the confidence that they are not at all alone in their struggle. We are there with them, right? Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, now is the time for souvenir presentation. I will request President of Pakistan, Dr. Arif Alvi, to do the honor. Please, sir. I would request Mr. George Galloway to receive the souvenir from President of Pakistan, Dr. Arif Alvi. Thank you very much, sir. Now, I would like to request Mr. Abdullah Dadaboy to present the souvenir to the chief guest, Dr. Arif Alvi, President, Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Thank you, sir. Without any further delay, now I would like to invite the Honorable President of Pakistan, Dr. Arif Alvi, to address the session. Dr. Arif Alvi is the 13th President of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Dr. Alvi was elected as a member of National Assembly from Karachi in 2013 and 2018 and was instrumental in drafting the passage of many bills, including one on alternate dispute resolution. He also chaired the subcommittee of electronic voting machines, digital identification of voters, and voting of overseas Pakistanis. He has been a renowned professional and has held many important positions in the field of dentistry. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Arif Alvi.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. Shahryar Afridi, my friend and minister, Mr. George Galloway, parliamentary leaders from England, Mr. Abdullah Dadabhai, Chairman Dadabhai Foundation and Center for Peace, Security and Development Studies, Mr. Sayyid Muhammad Ali Saab, many retired ambassadors sitting here, diplomats, scholars, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I must thank, first of all, those who have come from England and from abroad to attend this seminar, and I am very grateful. I've been an admirer of George Galloway, always. I've heard him since decades almost, and he's one person who has spoken about the Muslim cause in a manner where I believed Muslims should also have been speaking internationally. So thank you, George, for doing a splendid job and being our advocate in the world. Thank you. It is indeed a great pleasure to be here, to be able to say a few things. But you're very important people and scholars. Let me not waste your time in repetitions. Therefore, let me summarize first what I need to say definitely is the condemnation of Indian action as far as Kashmir is concerned and Indian action throughout India when it is suppressing its minorities, but especially in Kashmir, the human rights violation, the use of pellet guns, the fact that women have been raped, the fact that 100,000 people have been killed, the fact that more than 900 Indian soldiers are there to try and maintain peace, and the fact that the promises made to the Kashmiri people have been overrun by their bulldozers and by their tanks. They will never be able to suppress the people of Kashmir. And let me assure the people of Kashmir from this forum and through the media that the people of Pakistan will always stand by them. Now, cutting it down to what is possible and what can be done, and projecting where these things will be going. That is a matter which you must think about and keep on talking. Firstly, Pakistan has committed to stand by the Kashmir dispute in a legal manner, in all legal forums throughout the world, morally, ethically, diplomatically, and support that cause in every which way possible. And we will continue to do so. But then we must imagine what happens and what will happen. The promise to the Kashmiri people for plebiscite was made by an organization and an institution which was a result of the world and the nation states believing that we need to govern the world in a better manner. And that was the result of the Second World War. The First World War led to the League of Nations, and the Second World War led to the United Nations. And Pakistan puts its hope in the United Nations. India went to the United Nations. The Kashmiri people were promised a plebiscite. But I believe, over experience, over the last so many years, that it has become a forum of vested interest where humanity and where illegal occupations have been either ignored or maybe at times have been encouraged. So it's a very sad reflection on the world and its promises to the people. But then I go back and I look at the fact that after the Second World War, there was a meeting of the victors in the Red Sea where spheres of influence were decided, where it was decided that the allies and the victors will be allowed to work in such and such countries and to decide whatever they want to. And the result was the division of the Sultanate-e-Osmania, for example, the division of many places and spheres of influence where the other great powers did not interfere. And that should have raised alarm bells in my mind anyway. But then we kept on putting hope there. Kashmir issues went through vetoes from different powers, and it was never resolved. Today, the issues of humanity are subservient to the levers of economy, of trade. Decisions are made, opinions formulated. The role of the United Nations comes up wherever big powers want to have a solution. And where they don't want to have a solution, everything is ignored. So that's the suffering of our people in general. Our people, I don't mean to focus only on the Muslim world, focus on the fact that wherever people are suppressed, there is a license given to them, and which is very unfortunate. So today, the decisions are not based on principles, but are based on other factors. And we must realize that. So therefore, we will have to learn how to counter that. And that's what I mentioned when I said that I will not waste your time in the routines of what is happening, but actually trying to look into what can be done to undo that. I can cry, I can make an effort, I can give hope to myself and to the Kashmiri people. But at the same time, we must strategize, understand what the human race has been like and how does it go beyond. Wherever ethnic wars have been started or polarization has taken place, it is what I remember and what I can see, and history will support what I am saying, is a matter which takes definitely a few decades to handle. If you look at Nazi Germany, if you look at when people elevate themselves and their race, there is always loud clapping if I praise my ethnic group. People are open to that bias. And then it has its own cycle. It doesn't end fast. And we have seen this in Pakistan. So therefore, our own experiences can help us understand what is going to happen. We've seen that in our country, and that is where our reactions to Indian atrocities, our reactions to Indian attacks were very different from the Indians itself. That's where we have learned. So what did we learn, ladies and gentlemen? We learned the fact that the war and terror, or the fact that there was terror on our borders, or the fact that Afghan people were suppressed first by the Soviets, then by the Americans in their own logic, resulted in a war at our borders, and 3.5 million refugees came to Pakistan, and we succumbed to the fact that we must have a jihadi reaction to it, encouraged by vested interests throughout the world. It was more important to defeat the Soviet Union, and whatever picture you wanted to take to the world accepted that, fine. The Mujahideen were welcomed in the White House, and we got a license to fight that war, and we fought that war. And it went on for 30, it's still going on. In fact, our Afghan brothers are in misery for this reason or that reason. But Pakistan had refugees, 3.5 million refugees. And we supported them, and they morally. Today, I am so saddened by the fact that if there is a refugee crisis in the Western world, they're raising their walls. They don't even want to accept 80 people. There is a debate going on in Europe. Which country will accept 100 people? And imagine your moral dignity which you have achieved by the fact that you gave room to 3.5 million refugees. And they were refugees, irrespective of the fact. The human misery, to see human misery, and to react to that is important. So Pakistan therefore has been a leader. Today, my brother country, Syria, is holding 3.5 million refugees from the war in Syria, Egypt, Turkey. And I can understand the fact that what is the price being paid by them, but that is handling human misery. Today, Bangladesh has Rohingya refugees. And I had a meeting with Sheikh Hasina Wajid in Baku, and I was asking her, what are the chances of these refugees going back? And she said that the chances are grim, but at least they're trying, the Bangladesh government is trying to take care of them. So when I talk about the fact that what we learned, now imagine these things can be learned by the generation itself. This lesson cannot be learned by other people. And I'm surprised by that. And I've seen it within my life that this happens. And I just gave an example today that when I went to study in the US in the 70s, doing my master's at Michigan, I was very hopeful that the Americans have learned from Vietnam. And they will never forget that lesson. And when the Soviet Union went to Afghanistan, it was the Americans and the whole Western world which was saying, now the Soviet Union will learn its lesson. But lo and behold, what happened was that when the Soviet Union went to Afghanistan, into Afghanistan, and 10 or 15 years later, true, one generation had passed, promptly the Americans forgot their lessons and started interfering in the entire world. Do you think this is a coincidence that the misery in which the Middle East is in? Imagine the media when you talk. When you come to solutions, you must talk of world opinion and how can it be modulated. Imagine the weapons of mass destruction, the argument which was sold to the world. Imagine that. Can we fight that propaganda war? And the propaganda war is getting bigger and bigger. It's not the television only which is now doing propaganda war. It's the social media today which is able to modulate opinions in voting constituencies in the world. By releasing information, by releasing fake news, I heard, and I'm glad that this forum talked about fake news, by releasing fake news. Imagine that our opinion can be modulated. Our lives are simple. Human race cannot change all of a sudden. We are hardwired into being biased, all of us. We have our own experiences and we wear the chashma or the chashma of our experiences and then look at everything. Very few people, even the judges on which we place everything there, and hope that they look at things without bias. It is in human nature to look at things with bias. And therefore, the human nature is being exploited today in the world. The humanity is being exploited. You see, all arguments. Imagine selling democracy through the barrel of the gun and trying to change societies through the barrel of the gun. And realizing after millions have died, 30 years down the road, it can't be done. So, thank you very much, we are out. But what happened? Are there no war crimes? Are there no war crimes trials anymore? Crimes are going around. Crimes are happening. And in that context, let me then come back to what is happening in my immediate vicinity. What is happening in Kashmir is not, now that is where you look at the chessboard of those of you who have played chess and understood that looking at strategy is, you imagine what the others are thinking and what is happening. When Gary Kasparov lost to the Deep Blue computer in chess in, I think, 2001 or 2000, he said that this computer, I used to see the reaction of my opponent. This computer, I am glad. The only thing I got out of that was this computer was not happy at winning. So what I am saying is that this is actually, look at it as a chessboard. What is happening in India? And I've gone through it. I've gone through it in Karachi. All of you are from Karachi, most of you. I've gone through it in Karachi, where I expected that ethnic arguments will end in 5 years. The logic was there. The logic was not there. Huzur Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in his Akhri khutbah that the difference between an Arabi and Ajami, I am closing today. I am ending it forever. But he ended it. But it is not in human nature to end it in that way. So therefore, we went through those battles in Karachi, and it didn't end in 5 years, it ended in 30 years. We polarize ourselves in society to fight the Afghan war. And that polarization itself took 30 years. There are still remnants around. So what is happening in India? Now come back to what is happening in India. You remember the late Khushwant Singh. I'm sure a lot of you do. He wrote a book in 2003, The End of India. And it's a very interesting book. It's a very small book, but very interesting. And he says that it is not Pakistan which will destroy India. It is India which itself will destroy from inside. India will destroy itself. That's what he said. And he's not talking about physical destruction. He's talking about a moral destruction. India claimed to be a secular state. We did not claim to be a secular state. We claimed to be an Islamic state, but with the principles that all minorities have the same rights, what Quaid-e-Azam elaborated on. India claimed to be a secular state, and since then, it is striking at its own foundations all the time. So what is happening in India? There is a significant change in their thinking. India is at war with its own history. India is at war with itself. It doesn't know how to acknowledge the fact that the Muslims came to India and ruled over it in the traditional manner where what used to happen in those centuries. The Muslims ruled India in that manner. It wants to tear those pages out of that history. And it wants to hold the Muslims of India today responsible for what happened in the last 300 or 400 years. Cannot happen. How long can the Muslims of India keep on apologizing? And they don't need to apologize. But they're being forced to apologize. For those of you who read international papers, there's a recent article written in Washington Post, I forget the author, of the lady from Bombay. And she writes how miserable she feels to be living in India. She's outside of India and therefore she could write that. My relatives are in India and I know what they're going through. So, look at what is happening to the minorities. It's not the Muslims of India alone. The Sikhs were slaughtered in 93 in Delhi. That is how narrow-minded when you talk about a racial divide, when you talk about a serious religious divide, when you talk about saffronization of India, you will always come across these kind of reactions. The Muslims in different areas have had riots against them. And you know, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. In fact, it almost takes a generation for a person to start doing small jobs, small work, open up a small shop. And then, when it is challenged and destroyed, the entire community falls back down again. Look at the representation of the minorities in Indian assemblies, where the minorities are 13 to 14%, the representation does not exceed 2 or 3%. Who talks about them? Look at the Babri Masjid verdict, where everybody hoped in India that there should be some compromise, where there is no evidence that a mandir was destroyed, where there is no evidence that the place was the Janam Bhumi of Ram. Only the fact that there was a structure there which had some ethnic Indian roots, only that. Imagine only in 1949, some idols were placed in the Babri Masjid and therefore it was sealed. And since then, the Muslims lost every case in the Supreme Court of India, every case. Until finally, when a settlement came, the settlement came in a very one-sided. The masjid was there, it was demolished, and you get to build a temple there. I'm not against any ethnicity. I believe humanity is important. But imagine the hurt of the people. So what is happening in India? I'm coming back to that again and again because Kashmir is a reflection of what is happening in India. Kashmir is a political movement of Hindutva. Kashmir is something which the polarized Hindu majority, not the I'm Hindu. But you see, what happens is when you talk about racial politics, you drive with you a lot of people. Today, when Rajiv Gandhi went to Kashmir, Srinagar, not Rajiv, his son, Rahul Gandhi went to Kashmir and he made some bold statements there. As soon as he came back, within a week or two, he had to take some of the statements back. That's the pressure. People will not be allowed to speak. That is what is happening. Now, will India and Kashmir continue to take that pressure? I believe the fact that the Muslims and the minorities will react, I think this is something which we will have to put a piece on the chessboard, which we say that it is indeterminate, but looking at world history, I am sure there will be a resistance to what is happening. You can't take it. They can't take it lying down. They've never taken it lying down. But they are forced. They're not able to talk. They're not able to express things. Whoever does is either lynched, beaten up, or forced not to say anything in India. So if you can't say it in India, that means the Indian people, the innocent Indian people are dragged towards a serious polarization, which is not against Pakistan. Pakistan becomes a beating boy, something to beat, but it is actually they're beating their own people, degrading them. And how long will those people continue to be degraded? I don't have any idea, but in my entire thinking, it should be a very important part. How long will the Sikhs continue to be degraded? That is going to be a part of my thinking and my future. We have to identify with the pain of those people. Coming to Kashmir, having been disappointed in international institutions, let me tell you, the way the international institutions are reacting, this may continue for another 70 years. I have no idea. I met Prince Charles in Tokyo, and we talked about a lot of things, and he was going to Delhi, and I brought his attention to Kashmir, and he brought my attention to Brexit. And I said, we have nothing to do with Brexit, but you have to do a lot with Kashmir. So the government of the United Kingdom has a major role to play. But at the same time, let me then talk to you about what is important. We have to convince the world. And it's getting more and more difficult to convince the world. Why? Because the strength of the world, the strength of the United Nations is dissipating. The strength of the nation state is dissipating by the fact that we have to appeal to Facebook to allow our ideas to go through, and please don't stop them. So what is becoming more important today in the world as far as opinion is concerned are these places where ideas float and go through. And what is the quantum of ideas which float and go through? Facebook has made a clear determination. It says that whatever goes through, we will not judge the ethics of that. So there is no judgment of ethics. Then what is happening? What are the statistics? In the Indian elections, the recently held Indian elections, before which our Prime Minister had sent them a message of peace, and he was insistent. He sent a message of peace before the elections, he sent a message of peace after the elections, he sent a message of peace even after, while returning Abhinandan to India, the message of peace went along with that. But in the Indian elections, 80% of WhatsApp so-called information was fake, was false. Now what a big war we will have to fight. Because people look at these messages and formulate an opinion. But let me tell you what is still important is the fact that we should force India first to open up Kashmir to international media so that the images come out. The image of that Syrian boy, young boy who drowned in the Mediterranean, shook the world on that. The image of the Ethiopian fasting child with the vulture sitting next to it shook the world on what is happening. Whether the world reacted or did not react, there is still enough humanity in our minds to give that weightage and to think about what change can happen. So I believe one of the things which we should be struggling for is the opening up of that area. And the fact that the falsification of whatever, in fact, India says that they destroyed terrorist camps. There's a falsification in India about it. And imagine, what Pakistan learnt, and that is your strength. Pakistan learns that polarization is damaging. Pakistan learned that war and terror and these wars are damaging. Pakistan learned the value of peace, and therefore, when India attacked us, it was not only the Prime Minister saying it. Prime Minister was expressing the will of the people of Pakistan when he said that we don't want war. Our media were expressing the will of Pakistan and the lessons we learned. While across the border there was a frenzy of war. The Indian media was increasing the frenzy of war, while in Pakistan the media was talking peace. Imagine the difference what is there today. So therefore, if you play your cards right, if you continue on that path, like Mr. George Galloway said, that today, as the economy of India will be strained because of the fact that the people are being disunited, how irresponsible can the government of a country be when it is ready to divide its own people? How irresponsible. Here we are talking about the fact that the divisions must go. Here we are talking about the fact that the women who are not in the economic sphere should be brought into this economic sphere. We believe that every hand in Pakistan, every heart in Pakistan, every mind in Pakistan should be used in our economic development. You have India, on the other hand, which is destroying itself. Should we let it destroy itself? No. Why not? Because like I mentioned, refugees, I was afraid that any action in Kashmir will lead to refugee crisis in Pakistan. And I'm still worried about that. What will happen? Not the fact that we'll be stuck with them. Those are our brothers. We'll never be stuck with them. But the fact that an area which deserves a solution will not have a solution. So there are two places where things will change. The resistance of the Kashmiri people is important. They will dictate also, despite the fact that they have given so much sacrifices. Probably the solution of Kashmir demands sacrifices for them. The continuous support of the Muslim world, despite financial pressures. I met Mr. Mahathir Mohamad in Baku also, and I mentioned to him that I am sorry that India is putting pressure not to buy palm oil from you. And he mentioned the fact that the biggest buyer of palm oil of Malaysia is India. And I said, the people of Pakistan are grateful to you, Mr. Mahathir, and we believe. And I gave him a food for thought, and I said, we believe that if Mr. Mahathir and the people of Malaysia take a stand, they will not withdraw from that stand. And he said, rest assured. And he said, rest assured, Malaysia does not stand to withdraw, does not want to withdraw from that stand. There's another, I've taken quite some time, but there's another issue where I believe a lot of work will be done. And Mr. Imran Khan's tremendous speech talked about Islamophobia and xenophobia. Today the walls of countries are going up. He talked about Islamophobia and xenophobia. But one of the most important things he talked about is what we have mentioned here in these forums, is the fact that the media information has to be handled. Very, very important. In your lives it will be important. Keep in mind, you will be bombarded tomorrow and the world is changing. It's not the same. Please don't consider yourself strengthened that you are able to discriminate between truth and falsehood. You cannot. It is so overwhelming. It is very difficult to be able to do that. So I am warning myself, in fact, that this is one of the most difficult tasks in humanity for the future. I believe a very important step has been taken by Mr. Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Erdogan, and Mr. Mahathir Mohamad in venturing to establish a media channel for the propagation of your narrative, of the Muslim narrative. The world should know it's not a narrative which is based on falsehood. It's a narrative based on after the understanding the world misunderstands us. It's not a new narrative in any way. It is a narrative which has to be publicized more before we'll continue to lose our lives. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've tried to express to you a different perspective and a different area of thinking. And I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable input on the subject. And let me assure you one thing, where you have said as the President of Pakistan that commitment of Pakistan to support Kashmir ethically and morally. Each and every Pakistani, no matter where we are in the world, we are committed to this thing with our heart and soul. And I think so we all are, right? I request our Honorable Chief Guest, President of Pakistan, Dr. Arif Alvi, session chairs, speakers, and board members of CPSD and Dada Boy Foundation to assemble for group photo on stage.